Moscow's dogs take the metro. And I don't mean that one or two just happen to stumble onto an empty metro train every once in a while. No, Moscow has a whole category for them.
The subway dogs.
Russian subway dogs.
Russian subway dogs.
And if this wasn't impressive enough, the Moscow Metro is the 9th longest metro in the world. There's 279 miles of rail, there's 263 stations as of 2023, and these dogs navigate it every day to consistently travel all over the city. Moscow's stray dogs have also been seen obeying traffic laws like crosswalks and not defecating on sidewalks where there's heavy traffic. And all of this raises tons of questions, right? Questions like, how can they even begin to understand how to use the metro anyway? And why do they decide to use the metro? I mean, I don't know anybody who's sending out their dog to buy groceries for them on the bus, so what gives? This story goes all the way back to the Soviet era for Russia. Now, the Soviet Union held strict regulations regarding stray animals. In fact, Russia's government often conducted experiments on strays. How can one forget that Russia shot a stray dog into orbit in 1957 just to see what would happen? In other words, when begging for food can get you launched into space, it's no wonder why not very many stray dogs hung around. When the Soviet Union dissolved in the 1990s, many of those regulations dissolved with it. Now, this is great news for the dogs, but the result is the dog population was left unchecked, creating a pretty serious problem. Now, there's a dog for every 300 people within Moscow. The roughly 35,000 stray dogs means that there are about 84 dogs per square mile, meaning that they're not just common, but a part of everyday life within Moscow. Enter Andrei Poryakov. He's a Russian biologist who specializes in the study of wolves, and he decides instead of going out and studying wolves in the wild, he might as well just stay within Moscow and study the strays living right outside his door. Andrei studied the social development of these dogs within Russia, and he points to their social development for the reason why Russian dogs are able to walk on crosswalks and they're taking metro stations. He breaks this idea of social development of dogs into 4 categories: wild dogs, foragers, beggars, and guard dogs. Now, the idea of wild dogs most of us are accustomed to. They're wild animals living in forests because they're scared of people and they'll often bite. Their tails don't wag, they have a lack of friendliness, and they don't have spotted coats, which Andrei finds remarkable, since it's commonly thought that the gene that influences aggression is closely linked to the gene that influences color patterns. These types of dogs have literally reverted back to being wild animals at a genetic level. Foragers we're accustomed to as well. These are animals who are still scared of people, but they'll wander into cities at night, hunting and foraging for food and shelter. Most of Moscow's dogs fit this category, which is why most visitors of Moscow complain about the dogs howling at night, since most of these are nocturnal. However, the other 2 categories of dogs is where things start to really get interesting. Now, guard dogs, Andrei argues, are definitely the most socialized. They accept food from strangers, and after a while they start to guard them, viewing them as part of their pack. Now, moving on to Andrei's last category of these socialized dogs, beggar dogs. The leaders of these dog packs are not necessarily the strongest or the most dominant dogs. Oftentimes these are the smartest dogs because, well, the smartest dogs survive. And the rest of the members of these packs depend on these dog leaders for survival. Now, this results in some really specialized behaviors from these dogs. These dogs bark behind someone, intending to scare them into dropping food. They send out the cutest looking dog, having it wag its tail and beg for food from those who have given its food before, or they'll even profile people. They'll pursue ladies over the age of 40 with grocery bags over, say, men in uniforms who are more likely to kick at or scold them. These dogs go out of their way to avoid conflict in order to survive. That's why many believe that they don't defecate on sidewalks on busy streets. These dogs obey traffic signs, they ride escalators, and of course, they ride the tram. It's the beggar dogs and the guard dogs that are often referred to as Moscow's subway dwelling dogs. 500 dogs roughly live in subway stations. Of these, about 20 ride trams on a regular basis within Moscow. Now, theories to explain why they're able to correctly determine their routes include a combination of multiple things. First, people will argue that it's an ability to judge the length of time spent on the train in between stations. These people are arguing that these dogs can understand the time intervals between when the tram starts and stops. But that doesn't seem to make sense to most people. My dog doesn't really care whether I've been gone for 30 minutes or 30 days. He'll greet me the same. A recognition of the place names announced over the train's loudspeakers is often argued, which makes sense because a lot of times people will give commands verbally and their dog will be able to understand what they mean. The final is the scent of particular stations. If dogs are able to sniff each other and be able to determine moods, surely they can be able to sniff and understand which train station they're at. Regardless of the reason, Russia's stray dogs aren't really special here. There's plenty of other animals that have been observed with the exact same behaviors. Casper is a cat in Plymouth, England who took 11-mile round trips to the city center via bus. His owner authored a children's book about his exploits called Casper the Commuting Cat. Boji, a street dog in Istanbul, is notable for riding all forms of public transportation, including ferries, buses, metros, trams. The Istanbul Metro has reported that he visits at least 29 metro stations per day. Even though it's easy to view these dogs as pests, people view them as a comforting familiarity throughout the day. Even this guy says, "In the morning in the lobby of the Bibarevo metro station, I met this funny dog. We talked a little and I treated her to a couple spoons of meat from the near shawarma shop. True, 2 or more of her friends came to this treat." Yeah, that's a really funny dog. So people have really mixed feelings about the dogs in Moscow. In 2007, 20,000 dog attacks were recorded, but there's also statues of notable stray dogs. City officials were considering euthanizing any unclaimed strays, but at the same time, locals are building shelters for them in the winter and they feed them daily. At the end of the day, these dogs are just simply part of Russia's culture. Good or bad for the city is up for debate, but at the end of the day, these dogs are here to stay.